When the studio Double Dutch asked me to work on their game Chaos Battle, they were still very busy with speedrunners. Chaos Battle was basically playable, but one of the main problems with the game was that it wasn't any fun. So how do you go about fixing that problem? They hired me to do game design reworks to fix the game, bring it to a playable state, and implement these changes myself. One of the main problems with the game was that most of the matches resulted in just the players standing in front of each other and emptying their guns, and then one of them would die. And that just wasn't very exciting. On top of that, a lot of power-ups didn't really have any countermeasures. They would just activate and there was nothing you could do about it. So when it came to addressing the problems in this game, I first made a very big list of all of the issues that I noticed in the game. I played the game thoroughly and then presented my finds to the team and also proposed changes to the game. I wanted to make sure that they were okay with the things I wanted to change about the game to fix these issues. Another problem with the firefights in this game was that once you found yourself on the losing side of a battle, there was no real way to retreat. The only option was to die and respawn again. And this didn't really feel right. There should be a way to retreat from a battle if you're losing. So I came up with a new dodge roll mechanic. The dodge roll allows you to quickly close the gap with another player or to increase the gap. The dodge roll doesn't make you immune to damage, but you effectively roll underneath projectiles. An unintended side effect of the dodge roll was that you gain so much speed and momentum that if you jump afterwards, you jump really high. And at first this was really odd and completely unintended, but as we started playing we noticed that it was really fun to do. It just looked weird, but it was a really cool mechanic. So rather than removing this unintended super jump, instead we decided to give the characters a sort of jetpack animation to explain why they could do this super jump. And we just kept it in the game. When it came to actually fixing the problems, I started off with some of the biggest issues that were most easy to fix, such as the balance with the guns. The game has a lot of interesting weapons. Unfortunately, some of them were obviously better than other ones. For example, the rocket launcher instantly kills players, while a lot of the other weapons do mediocre damage. So my plan was to at least make all of the weapons useful under the right circumstances. This meant that I had to increase the damage of the shotgun a lot, and also the firing speed of the shotgun, make the rifle a lot better, and also increase the usefulness of the grenade launcher. One of the biggest changes perhaps to the weapon system was just the ability to aim your sights, because originally you could only fire horizontally. So I added an option to aim up and down, and this really affected the gameplay a lot. It meant that if you had a grenade launcher, you could now find higher ground and shoot down on your enemies. Or you could take a rocket launcher and fire up at your enemies. Another problem was that often you would pick up a weapon that you already had, and there was not really any purpose to this. I felt what the game lacked was a sense of a power curve throughout the match. As the match progressed, there wasn't really a change in the strength of the players, and I really wanted to make picking up the same weapon twice more useful, instead of it being a useless power-up at that point. So I came up with the idea that whenever you pick up the same weapon twice or 3 or 4 times, every single time the weapon becomes stronger. You gain more damage with the weapon, it fires faster, it fires more projectiles, it gains quicker reload times. And even if you die, you keep these upgrades to your weapons. You may lose the weapon that you currently have in your hands, but once you pick it up again, it still has the same upgrades. For example, you can pick up the rocket launcher 3 times, and at that point it starts shooting 3 rockets in one shot, which is really awesome. But then if you were to die, you lost the rocket launcher, but the rocket launcher retains its upgrades. So the next time in that match you pick up the rocket launcher, it still fires 3 rockets. So now it also made more sense to switch weapons more often. If you saw two of the same weapon drop in the arena, it might tempt you to switch weapons and upgrade that particular weapon. Also, another problem was that originally you started each match with the machine gun, and the machine gun is a really powerful weapon, which raises the question, why would you even want to change to a different weapon? So I added a new weapon called the pistol. And the pistol is the only weapon that doesn't drop as a power-up and you can't upgrade it. The pistol is objectively a worse weapon than all of the other weapons in the game. So it's an effective starting weapon, and it makes picking up the machine gun a really interesting thing rather than just starting off with the machine gun. However, upon playtesting this, we noticed that as you were getting really far in the matches and people were upgrading their weapons, once you lost your weapons and respawned with the pistol, you were really at a severe disadvantage. So a rule I implemented was that once the round is at its halfway point, players automatically respawn with the machine gun at that point. This may seem a little bit odd, but it felt right upon playing it. You start off with the pistol, and halfway through the round, you start respawning with the machine gun instead. This kind of evens the playing field, even if you die at a very unfortunate moment. Another big problem were the power-ups. A lot of power-ups were just not any fun. For example, the freeze power-up, it instantly froze everyone on the screen, and there's not anything you can do to prevent it. You're basically turned into a block of ice instantly. So what I wanted to do is present a counter, and quickly it became very clear that some power-ups you want to activate immediately upon picking them up, and others you really want to activate them yourself at a specific moment. So I started differentiating between these two different categories of power-ups. The freeze power-up is now activated by the player himself, and it results in multiple projectiles that the other players can potentially dodge. This leads to a very interesting sort of gameplay where once someone picks up a freeze power-up, they want to get as close to other players as possible. And of course there's some risk involved with that, and that results in very interesting combat situations. You deliberately have to put yourself in harm's way in order for the freeze power-up to be the most effective. There were two other power-ups that were just very annoying. There was one that simply pushed other players away for a very long time, and there was another one that pulled players towards the person activating it for a very long time. The first one was just very annoying. The second one was annoying and also made the player using the power-up more vulnerable, because maybe you do not want the players to come closer to you. Why would you want that unless you have a shotgun perhaps, but it's a very niche thing. So I tried to rework these power-ups while still maintaining some of their original intent. So the push power-up, instead of it completely disabling your controls, what it now does is it gives a short blast, which is once again timed by the player using the power-up. It can be very useful, for example, to launch other players into obstacles on the side of the screen, or to create some distance when you need it. The pull power-up I changed radically. Instead of it pulling the players towards you, it creates a magnetic field now that makes projectiles change their course. This means that when a player fires a rocket at you, it kind of bends off course and can potentially hit other players. But it doesn't make you completely immune. For example, players with a shotgun can still kill you if they get very close to you. It also has a very interesting interaction with the freeze power-up, because the freeze power-up now generates freeze projectiles, and those are affected by the magnetic field as well, and they also change course, which results in some very interesting chaos on the screen. There were some weapons in the game that were really problematic. There's a grenade item and there are landmines, and the problem was, once you picked up the landmines or the grenade, you lost whatever weapon you had before that. And that's a bit of a problem, because these weapons are one fire only and then you're without a weapon. And this didn't really make any sense. Why should you be punished for picking up landmines if you just had a rocket launcher? Why would you want that? So that's how I came up with the idea of sidearms. You can basically have certain power-ups or weapons in your sidearm slot. This means that you still keep your main weapon and you can activate these sidearms at any moment. Once you pick up a new power-up, it replaces the sidearm that you had currently equipped. One of the other interesting power-ups in the game is the shield. Originally the shield replaced your weapon, which was just terrible. I mean, what are you gonna do without a weapon? So this was one of the things that prompted me to create a sidearm system. You can hold your shield in your sidearm slot and activate it whenever you want. And the AI actually makes pretty good use of it as well. What the shield does, it deflects any projectiles that are coming your way. And this includes lasers and even rockets. But I wanted to make sure that you couldn't use the shield forever. So it can only take a certain number of hits and then it just breaks. But it can be a very deadly weapon, especially to equal the playing field. If all of the other players have very powerful weapons, you can deflect it back at them. Once all of these power-ups start really working together, you get the chaos that the name of the game refers to. An important change I made to the landmine was that it was no longer a weapon. Instead, a landmine was now in your sidearm slot. Originally the landmine was very visible, but I thought that kind of defeated the purpose of a landmine. So instead now it sinks into the floor with a very loud beep, thus forcing the players to kind of pay attention and remember where it was. Another thing I did for the landmine power-up is that it no longer triggers against the person placing it. That was really annoying, getting killed by your own landmine. So it no longer does that. Another thing it does is the explosion is a lot bigger, making it more likely to hit multiple players. And it shoots out these fiery projectiles. So even if you don't take a direct hit from the landmine, you could still take some shrapnel damage from it for just being near it. One of the other things I wanted to keep consistent in the game was the way power-ups interact with other factors in the game. For example, there's an insta-kill power-up, and I wanted to make sure that stuff like the time bomb and the Centurion also die in one hit if you have the insta-kill power-up. We also wanted to maintain a consistent color scheme for how the power-ups work. So double damage is always blue and instant kill damage is always purple. Another thing I felt was really important was more feedback to the players. We have these two power-ups that are very powerful. There's the double damage power-up and there's the insta-kill power-up. And I felt it was very important to let the players know that they are taking double damage or they are taking insta-kill damage. That wasn't there before. You would just take a hit from an insta-kill bullet and that would be it. So now there's this text that pops up. It says insta-kill if you get hit by insta-kill damage. And it says crit if you get hit by double damage. Color communication is also very important. So whenever you die from insta-kill damage, the text is always in purple because the insta-kill bullets are in purple. Insta-kill damage is always purple. Same with double damage. It's always blue, so the text is in blue. One of the big changes I made to the game was the chaos tracker. I felt that the matches on their own were kind of boring, and for a game called Chaos Battle there wasn't a whole lot of chaos going on. So I looked at other games for inspiration, such as Towerfall, which is a game in a similar genre. And what Towerfall does very well is it introduces different events that change the way the arena works. So what I came up with was a system where as the rounds progress and more kills are scored, random events trigger that change the arena. For example, you can have the entire arena fill up with toxic waste, or have these dangerous electric walls appear on the side of the screen. There's even a random event where a boss enemy is dropped into the arena, which we nicknamed the Centurion. And this changes what the players are focusing on, because all of a sudden this boss enemy becomes the main threat in the arena instead of your fellow players. One of the other problems I noticed in the game was that it was really hard to keep track of the score and see who was in the lead, because when frantic action is going on, you don't have a lot of time to look in the corners of the screen and to see what your score is and what the score of the other players is. And then you have to compare the two to see who has the most kills. And while you're doing that, you're probably getting killed. So I decided to change this up a bit and create a meter at the top of the screen that just shows which player is in the lead. Because you don't really need to know your exact number of kills. You just need to know if you're winning. So I came up with the idea of the Chaos Tracker, which not only tracks your score, but also tracks upcoming Chaos events. In doing so, the random events aren't completely random anymore. I mean, they're still picked random, but you can see when a Chaos event is coming up. It's also possible for the same Chaos event to trigger twice. And if the Chaos event is some kind of on-screen hazard, this means the hazard goes away. But there are also other types of events that become worse the more they trigger. For example, there's a zombie outbreak, and if that triggers multiple times in the same match, you get more zombies and you get stronger zombies. The same applies to the Centurion. When the Centurion is spawned early on in the match, it's usually a very weak boss enemy. But if it spawns later on in the match, or near the end of the match, it's a lot stronger. The way the Centurion works is it always has a random weak spot. It can be vulnerable to certain types of weapons, or it can be vulnerable to attacks from behind. It can also be vulnerable to explosives. And the Centurion also has random special abilities. These special abilities can be that it fires very fast, or that it has more hit points or more armor. But it can also have far more deadly effects, such as bullets that instantly kill the player, or it can be immune to bullets, or it can have projectiles that deal double damage. Originally the Meat Grinder was a power-up that you activated yourself. It was really weird. It tends to kill a lot of players. It made more sense to make it a chaos event, so that's what it is now. The Meat Grinders are really scary. They tend to move all of the action to the top of the level, which is very interesting. And since all of the chaos events are all about moving the players to different parts of the level, usually, it made sense to make the Meat Grinders a chaos event. The Poison Gas is an interesting chaos event. It basically makes the top of the screen slowly a death zone. You don't die instantly from the gas. It deals damage over time, but it still is a very strong incentive to stay near the lower side of the screen. I think the Toxic Waste is one of my favorite chaos events. It's very subtle, it's very simple, straightforward, and it moves all of the action to the top of the screen. The Electric Wall chaos event is a lot of fun. It's one that is abused the most, I think, in death matches, because it's so much fun to launch other players into it, either by kicking them or by using the repulsor power. Zombies were already in the game, but it made more sense to make a zombie outbreak a chaos event. I added some lightning flashes to create some more dramatic effect and reason why these zombies are emerging. Originally the zombies just popped up out of the air, and that really didn't make a lot of sense to me. So what they do now is they emerge from the ground. They have a special animation and you can see them coming, and while they're doing the animation they can't hurt you yet. This gives the players some time to respond to the zombies, instead of just having them drop on top of their heads and killing them instantly. There are also special zombies called zombie overlords, which sometimes spawn as the zombie event becomes more severe. And this can happen if the zombie event triggers multiple times in a match. The zombie overlord is basically a stronger version of the zombie. It looks identical, but if it kills the player, it actually gains more health and it regenerates health. It also moves faster, it has more hit points. But it's basically just another zombie. But I wanted to add a little bit more variation to the zombies. Originally there was a plan to create more different types of zombies, but the only one we managed to squeeze in is the Toxic Zombie. It's basically the same zombie, but it's glowing green, and if you kill it, it launches this shower of acid around itself that does medium damage. The Centurion is my favorite chaos event of all. It's also one of the chaos events that I probably put the most work in. It has an interesting AI. It will open fire on any enemy that it can directly see in a line in front of itself. And it has a certain delay before it starts firing, so there is enough time for the player to get to safety. It fires both machine guns and rockets, so it's really over the top. But believe me, there are worse versions. It always has a random weakness and some random strengths, and those are picked during the match. And the later he appears in the match, the more advantages he'll have, the more strengths he'll get. He always has one weakness, and it's usually a weakness against a particular type of weapon, a type of damage, or being attacked from behind, or explosives. Whenever you see the text cleanup time popping up, that's basically a chaos event triggering twice. It's already active and it's been activated again, which deactivates it. So electric walls can pop in, but they can also go away again. The toxic waste can be drained from the level. There were already drone power-ups in the game, so it was pretty easy to add a drone swarm to the game as a chaos event. The drones always go after the player that is in the lead. This is sort of a subtle balancing mechanic to favor the players that are doing the worst at the moment. The Airstrike Chaos event is another event that makes the top of the screen a hazard zone. Every now and then an invisible aircraft will pass by from left to right or right to left. It kind of alternates and it drops bombs. With enough health you can survive the impact of these bombs, but it's generally not a place you want to be. Originally Chaos Battle had multiple battle modes. It had a mode called Chaos Banner, but this Chaos Banner mode wasn't very different from just ordinary deathmatch, apart from the fact that you had the Chaos Banner item. So now with the Chaos event system in place, it made more sense to make the Chaos Banner item something that dropped as part of a Chaos event. So that's the way it is now. There's a special Chaos event that summons the Chaos Banner, and basically how the Chaos Banner works is the longer you hold it, the more it charges up, and if you get killed you drop the banner, but it retains its charges. Once the Chaos Banner is charged all up, it unleashes a powerful explosion that kills all of the other players on the screen. It remembers who the last player was that held the item. So even if you get killed as the explosion takes place, it's still the other players that get killed. One of the things that the lead artist wanted to do with the Chaos Banner item was make it really awesome. The way he explained it to me was he kind of imagined it looking like opening the Ark from Indiana Jones. He wanted lightning bolts and ghosts to fly out. He wanted to be this amazing over-the-top thing. So I went to work with it. He gave me the art assets for the ghosts and the lightning. And I started mixing sound effects to create this really awesome sound effect that you hear in the game now. Often getting these power-ups to feel good is not only tweaking the way the power-up works, but also getting it to look awesome and sound awesome. All of these things have to work together to make the power-up work. I also added some new features in the game design that benefit the players that are doing really bad. There's a special Chaos event called the Avenger. And the way the Avenger works is it looks at the player with the lowest score. The player with the lowest score becomes the Avenger. He becomes temporarily imbued with special powers that allow him to do double damage and temporarily invulnerability. The goal here was to do something more in the spirit of Mario Kart, where there's an opportunity for players to catch up if they're really behind. But unlike Mario Kart, they still have to do most of the legwork themselves. So you don't instantly jump to pole position. You still have to chase down your fellow players. But you have the benefit of doing more damage and temporarily taking no damage yourself. Another thing I implemented was a mechanic that looks at what your current score is and how quickly you are dying. And if you're dying a lot and have a very bad score, you will retain invincibility longer upon respawning back into the match. Hopefully this is enough to help you obtain a new weapon to help you even the score, or maybe reach a safe area. Because most of the time when players are doing really bad, they are often dying very quickly upon respawning as well. And I wanted to give the player a little bit more time to gain an advantage. So now that Chaos Banner was no longer a separate game mode, the question became, what other game modes will there be? And the most logical outcome seemed to be some kind of survival mode. In survival mode, the player has to survive as many rounds as possible. Each round, the player is bombarded with AI bots, zombies, and the Centurion. The longer the player survives, the bigger and more difficult the waves become. We also created a new item called the Time Bomb. The idea behind the Time Bomb is that the moment it drops on the screen, you have to kill it really quickly. If you don't kill it in time, it explodes and kills everything on the screen. There are a lot more small things I did for the game that don't really impact the game design. I added the opening logo for the game with multiple layers for parallax effect and sound effects. I added an end screen for all of the rounds. I created a start screen. I changed the character select so you now actually see the characters animating, and it just looks way more interesting than it did before. There's now also a mission description when you select a level. That wasn't there before. And together with the lead artist, I implemented this mentor character that basically provides the information that the characters need for the mission. I suppose there's a whole backstory involving these animals being some sort of mercenaries. It was never really completely fleshed out, and I suppose it's not really important. But we did try to get more details regarding the setting in there. Other slight touch-ups that I did was adding burning effects whenever you get hit by fire damage. Adding unique gifts to the players when they are killed. Like for example, when you explode there are these black bony gifts. But if you're hit by insta-kill damage, you want to see these purple gifts. And when you get hit by a laser, there should be blue gifts. We even have green gifts when you land in toxic waste or get poisoned. I really like the effect also of the sparks flying off with certain impact effects. One of the things I really wanted to do with this game, and I didn't get to do, was change the level design. I personally feel the gameplay is really restricted by the small size of the levels. And I would really like to see much bigger levels with way more interesting layouts. Unfortunately, this game is running on a slightly older version of the Speedrunners engine, and those changes simply weren't possible. They didn't even have an easy level editor to make new levels. It was very cumbersome. So it would have taken way too much time to create new levels for this. Plus, severe changes would have to be made to the camera system to facilitate much bigger levels. It's also not very clear if you'd still be able to see the action if the camera zoomed out more. So in the end we decided to just make very minor tweaks to the existing levels and not really do anything else level design wise. I think it's a pity. I would have loved to do more with the actual level design, make my own levels. Maybe in the future before they release it. But for now we just focus on just the gameplay and left the levels as is, mostly. Anyway, this is Chaos Battle. At the moment of making this video, Chaos Battle hasn't been released yet, because the boys at Double Dutch are really busy with their new game Speedrunners. But I'm hopeful that it will be released soon. I think it's a lot of fun to play. Me and the lead artist had a lot of fun playtesting it as well. And it's been a lot of fun working on it and fixing some of the problems with it. It's interesting sometimes how you can start making a game and then all of a sudden notice that it's not as much fun as you thought it would be. And if you're staring at the same project for a very long time, eventually you might no longer see why it's not working. And it becomes useful to bring in a second opinion, as I came in, to look at it and see what can be changed and what can be fixed to make it more fun.